Hello, I'm Mark Pennell. I have a lot of questions about the Bible, and I get answers from my dear friend, Paul Sartorelli, the pastor here at Trinity and mentor.
Not that I know all the answers. Let's be really clear from the start.
No.
But I know the one who does.
Yes, he does, actually. We're going to get to a couple of subjects in the next couple of podcasts that I think you're going to enjoy. One of them is a special guest, and we'll get to him, well, I guess right now.
Yeah, and partly because we want you to know in the months to come, maybe about once a month or so, we are going to bring in special guests, a scientist, I'm hoping to bring a friend of mine who's an African-American pastor, various experts in different fields that we don't know all that much about, but someone else does, just because we think it'll be really interesting for you, and it will be a fresh take on perhaps a subject that we all want to hear about. So yes, guests are coming, and today we will have a very unique guest, won't we?
We really do. He's kind of a legend. I mean, I know that word is thrown around a lot, but this guy really was. His name was Howard, I think, George Hendricks.
Yeah, Howard G. Hendricks.
That's right.
One of my professors at seminary.
He was known as Prof by most of his 10,000 students.
Yes.
He passed away in 2013, almost 90 years old.
Yeah, I can't believe it was that long ago. When I heard that Prof passed away, it just seems like the day before yesterday.
He taught for more than 60 years at Dallas Theological Seminary, one of the most respected in the country.
And I had him for 4 of those.
Oh, really? Really, 4?
Yes.
He taught Bible exposition and hermeneutics, all about Herman Munster, which I thought was rather interesting.
He was very good. He did a really good Lily imitation.
Listen to this. Just 3 of his students ended up becoming internationally known: Chuck Swindoll, David Jeremiah, and Tony Evans. They all be.
Well, wait a minute.
Oh, and Paul Sartorelli. I'm sorry, I forgot about that.
I go to India all the time.
Yeah.
I go to Italy. By the way, let me just say this, just toot my own horn, or yours too. Mark and I used to do a show called Word on the Street for WCRF and Moody Radio. I was in Cameroon, Africa, with Wycliffe Bible translators, and walking down this little pathway of Wycliffe's campus, and someone saw me and said in their African accent, "What's the word on the street?" So add a 4th one, pal, to these internationally known students of Howard Hendricks.
Do you know what it's like living with this man? I want to tell you that one of the most amazing things, he was a real problem child. His parents broke up. At the time that he was born, he kind of said that maybe he had been the cause for their divorce or breaking up. I don't know if they
Many kids of divorce feel that.
I know that. His 5th grade teacher said that he was most likely to end up in prison.
Wow.
And one time she roped him to a chair and put tape on his mouth. His 6th grade teacher, the very next one, said, "I've heard a lot about you, and I don't believe in a single one of them."
That's awesome.
And she changed his life. So
in the classroom, can I tell you, he used to talk about her all the time, about how this one teacher saw in him what he couldn't even see in himself. And in a sense, that's what he does, at least did for students all the time. He would see in you, not just seminary students, anybody, parents, teachers, pastors, parishioners. He had the ability to communicate and to look into someone and enable them to see their potential. He did it for me.
Did he ever stand on a chair for you?
In class, he did some crazy things. He may have stood on a chair and
when he thought his students were bored, he would do, just step on a chair and start teaching.
He was a very funny man. We used to call him the Don Rickles of seminary. Because he was so funny and he was so sarcastic all the time. I used to think that he didn't know when I was skipping class, and I would show up after a class, and in the middle of a lecture, he would see me there and he'd say, "Sartorelli, why were you flicking class yesterday?" And I was like, oh man, he busted me again, time and again.
What's amazing is you told me a story about when you were at Promise Keepers. He was oftentimes the what do they call the first?
He was the keynote speaker.
Keynote, there
yes,
we go. I couldn't
absolutely.
remember, whatever, you know how it is when you get 65. He saw you sometime after that at the Promise Keepers and recognized you. He had 10,000 students. I wonder if he remembered all of them as well as he did you.
He recognized me, and partly because I skipped class all the time, because he asked me with all my friends from church, are you flicking class again? I did bring him to church once. I invited him to our church. It was back when we had a really early worship service. And it was a delight to bring him. And here's what I told him. And then we're going to get into some of the things that he said that apply to your life and mine too. But I invited him to church. He was going to do all 3 worship services. And the first one was like an 8 a.m. service. Okay. And it was the middle of the winter. It was a dead service.
Mostly the most conservative services is the first one.
It was slower. It was quieter. Usually the older people went there. Okay. So anyway, I said, Prof, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to introduce you in this service, then you preach, and I'm going to go teach a class, and then we'll do it all again. I'll meet you here between first and second service, and then between second and third, etc. So first service goes. I think it goes great. I meet him between services. Again, it was the 8 o'clock service. I said, so hey, Prof, how did the first worship service go? And he looks at me in his sarcastic way, and he says, that was no worship service. That was an embalming service. So from that moment on staff, we always referred to the 8 o'clock service as the embalming service.
Of course, I don't think you told them that.
No, we didn't.
Okay,
go ahead.
Tell me all about him, the way you remember him and some of the things that he said. He always was famous for his little comments.
So many things. And let me just say, my wife is also a huge, huge disciple of his. He wrote a book based on the class of how to study the Bible that was so good. She has all of her lady leaders. She leads a huge discipleship program and has for years. They have to read his book. I think it's called By the Book, which teaches you how to study your Bible.
Okay.
And so anybody that's ever...
Is that hermeneutic?
Hermeneutics is how to interpret, so it's a piece of it.
Okay.
Bible study methods is looking at the Bible and saying, okay, what does it say? That's observation. What does it mean? That's interpretation. That's hermeneutics. And then how does it apply to my life?
Okay.
And anyone that's ever heard me teach, in some ways they've heard a lot of Howard Hendricks because he taught me how to study the Bible.
Okay.
He said so many profound things. And I thought just for a few minutes, as our first guest on A Fresh Take, Howard Hendricks.
And you couldn't find a better first guest, even though he's not here to help us talk about himself. He wouldn't want to do that in the first place. He was not good at that. It's nice to have him.
Okay, so here's the first one. In some ways, my favorite. Here's what he said. If you're a parent, a teacher, a leader, here's what he says. You cannot impart what you do not possess.
Interesting.
Now think about it. You're a parent and you want to teach your child about patience. And you're the most impatient person in the world.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, how many teachers are trying to teach stuff that they just don't know? I was just actually in a staff meeting, and we were talking about marriage and marriage counseling in the church and things like that. And one of the men on our staff is studying some marriage counseling principles from a secular institute. And the man that leads this institute of marriage has been divorced twice and is on his 3rd marriage. Okay. And it's like, wait a minute, what's this guy going to teach me about marriage? He's failed at it 3 times. You cannot impart what you do not possess. Isn't that funny? All right, we can say this because this is a fresh take. I went to Catholic school when I was a kid. Yeah. We had a priest teach us about sex ed. It's like, what's that all about? I mean, even as 9th graders, we saw right through that. Yeah. He can't teach us, right?
Interesting.
Yeah. Do as I say, not as I do. It's really asking the question, are you an authentic person?
Yeah.
Are you experiencing what you are telling?
Yeah.
Because if you're not, shut up.
All right.
You cannot impart what you do not possess. In whatever you're teaching and whatever you're leading and whatever you're doing, you better make sure you own it first before you ever teach it.
Well, then I guess I'm not going to be talking the rest of this podcast.
Yeah, me neither. So we'll see you later. I love this one. I tell this to pastors all the time. So much of what I say comes right from Hendricks. He says, you can impress people at a distance, but you can only impact them up close.
Oh, wow.
You can impress people at a distance. So right now, people are watching us, and they're really impressed by us.
I know you are. I can tell.
And if you're a parent and you're working 70 hours a week and you barely see your kids, they can be impressed with your titles, with your whatever you are. But unless you are up close, you're never going to make an impact.
Very good point.
I was the lead pastor of a mega church. And it's easy to impress when you're in front of a room of 2,000 people 3 times on a Sunday. And I know a lot of mega church pastors that are very impressive. I got tired of that because you can only impact people up close.
Matter of fact, it's kind of interesting. As a side, Saturday we went on our regular walk, and then we ended up at a Starbucks. And he went to this one website about a particular church somewhere. And when you typed in the website of the church, the pastor comes up. His face, he's smiling at you, and nothing about the church at first. You just simply see him, and you kind of wonder, what's going on here? It's about the church, not about the man.
Yeah. That's dangerous. I'll also say on that walk about this one, as Mark and I are walking, as you can tell, Mark has a very distinct voice. And as we're walking, this lady's walking by that had these 2 beautiful greyhounds. And we stopped and asked if we could pet them and had a nice friendly conversation. And all of a sudden she recognized his voice. And he used to work with NPR and WKSU, and she knew him. But here's the cool thing. Before that encounter, she knew you as the guy with the golden voice.
Whatever.
Which, by the way, I always feel like a 9-year-old next to him. So she knew him as the
embarrassing me, you know?
She knew him as the guy with the golden voice. But then for 5-8 minutes there, we sat and we chatted and we talked about her and her pets. And she realized, in a sense, what a good man you are. For her whole life, you were the voice of WKSU or of NPR News or whatever it was. And okay, it's easy to impress from afar.
Right.
And she was impressed. Now all of a sudden she knew the reality of the man. And that should be the goal of our lives, everyone. Whether you're a school teacher or a boss or a pastor, you only impact up close. That's so important to know that.
Okay.
All right, here's the third one.
All right.
Experience is not the best teacher. You often hear that. Maybe Buddha said it.
Really? Is that true?
Here's what he said. This is Hendricks. Experience is not the best teacher. Evaluated experience is the best teacher.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, you got it speaks of a life of contemplation.
So I'll bet when he was done with the class, as many classes as he taught, I'll bet many times he would wonder, did I get it across? Did I do what was important? I think at the end of his life, I saw an interview that you sent me. Swindoll was asking some questions, and he was extremely humble, but he was talking about how he was so grateful that he had had a chance to impact people's lives. He took it as a huge responsibility, and you can tell that he was somebody that never slacked in his responsibilities. He was very serious about making sure that every student got every bit of the information that he had for them.
And he caused us to evaluate our own lives in the sense that we didn't just experience his class. That's what he said. Experience isn't the best teacher, but you have to evaluate. And so he would make us go over our notes and really think through everything we just experienced with him. That's the best teacher. And so if you go through, you went through some heart issues a few years ago. That experience didn't necessarily change your life, but if you evaluated your life habits, your priorities, your perspective in life, then all of a sudden, serious medical issues can, in fact, change your life.
I'm going aside here for a second, but I thought it was interesting. I was listening to the radio just last night, and there was this woman who had cancer, and the guy asked her what had changed after she'd won the battle of cancer. She said, Nothing. And I thought, how can you go through something like that, a life-threatening disease, and not learn from it, not grab from it? And this is one of the reasons that I find it wonderful to be a believer, is the fact that you can, if you go through cancer or any other life trial, know that he's there all the time.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know how people can go through their lives without knowing he's there. That's just, that really throws me off.
Because that's part of the evaluation of the experience. If experience is not the best teacher, but evaluating it is the best teacher, part of the evaluation of a life experience is, if you are a follower of Christ, you believe in the sovereignty of God and in the fact that everything that happens in your life, He can make it purposeful. He can make it to help develop your character, help draw you closer to Him or to other people. So you're right, that God perspective in life can certainly make experiences that much more meaningful.
What else do you have?
Okay, here's one. The measure of you as a leader, the measure of you as a leader is not what you do, but what others do because of what you do.
Got it.
So it's not what you do as a leader, it's what are your followers doing? I mean, in some ways, I'm sitting here talking about Herod Hendricks. He's the perfect proof of that. His measurement as a professor isn't just by what he taught, but by what his students taught and lived. Your measure as a leader, as a father, is not just what you have done as a father, but what your kids do.
Right. Paul did that. He wrote to his, I don't know which ones it was, but he was
Timothy, Titus.
Right. And he said to the people in the letters, do as I do. And he wasn't asking you to, I was confused about this because I thought you were supposed to imitate Christ, but he was saying, I'm as close to humanly possible as there's a person who follows Christ. Do as I do. He wasn't bragging. He was stating a fact.
And he said, follow me as I follow Christ.
Yes.
So in as much as his life was a pattern after Jesus Christ, he's saying, follow me.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's a really good one. If you're a parent, if you're a boss, if you're a leader, it's not just your to-do list that matters. It's the to-do list of people that are under you, and are they following your example? I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Okay, here's one. He just asks a question, and I'll let you answer this question.
Oh, boy.
How big is your God? The size of your God determines the size of everything.
That's a good question.
How big is your God?
Well, I think that he's really big.
So big.
Little private joke.
That's what the children do, right? So big. God is so big.
But that's a very good question. I'm going to throw it back at you. You're a pastor. How big is your God?
I can give you the theological correct answer. He's omniscient and omnipresent. And yet, sometimes when life gets difficult or the worries, actually we're going to talk about worry and anxiety in one of the upcoming shows. When the worries of life overwhelm, then all of a sudden my God gets pretty small, you know? And I think it's easy to get that way, to get so focused on the here and now and how unsolvable these problems are. We forget about God.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's hard to forget about an omniscient, omnipresent God, but sometimes we do, don't we?
Did he teach a big God?
Oh, all the time.
Right.
Yeah, he really did. Hendricks did. He taught faith. I mean, he basically used to say, unless you are stepping out in faith, you're just doing the rote practices that you've been taught to do.
I mean, that's religion.
Yeah, it is. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he always pushed us out to step out in faith and he was really big on creativity. And one of the ways you know you're stepping out in faith is that you are thinking creatively, about your life, about your ministry, about your parenting. Think out. He was really big on thinking out of the box.
And taking the individual gifts that you've been given and use them in his name.
Yes.
You had one that he said, I wish I could remember it. Something about if you want to be like, if you want to be like this other person, you're not worth it, or something like that.
Oh no, it's if you're just like someone else, we don't need you. If you're just like someone else, I mean, this was sort of his sort of sarcasm at times. We don't need you. And what he's getting at, part of it was, it's easy to just copy other people. You see again, maybe you're a leader of an organization and you take leadership training from whomever. And you want to become just like that leader, or you just want to be exactly like your mother or your father or your pastor. You know, I hear pastors all the time. Let's say they're big fans of Tim Keller. I'm a big fan of Tim Keller. And yet, as I listen to these fans of Tim Keller, they begin talking like him and they begin to have intonations like him.
Oh my.
People did it with Hendricks too, for that matter. Be yourself is what he's saying. Yeah. God made you. He made you with your gifts, with your talents, with your passions. Just be yourself. If you're just like somebody else, we don't need you. Yeah, the positive side of that statement is, but we need you. Yeah. The real you, the you that Christ can use to affect people's lives and maybe even change the world.
Yeah, God did not make us by stamping out little exact copies of each other. We were not widgets in a factory. We were individually made one at a time, and that we were given certain gifts, and God asks us to use them in His name.
Yep.
Fascinating. Anyway.
Let me give one more, and it's about the Bible. The Bible was not given to make us smarter sinners, but to change our lives. The Bible was not given to make us smarter sinners, but to change our lives.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, you never want to, you should be a fly on a wall. I was going to say you don't want to be. You should be the fly on a wall of a group of pastors that get together and talk about people in their church. Because there are, at times, all of us as Jesus followers can have a whole bunch of religious knowledge and a whole bunch of Bible memorization and all of that. Right. And yet we're as caustic and as nasty on the road or as angry on social media as anybody else. Well, then what good is the Bible doing you? Yeah. It's just making you a biblically smart sinner.
Yeah. I'm guilty of that more than I'd like to say. I really am. I don't practice what I preach to myself, so to speak.
I love the fact that we've talked about Mark now is reading the English Standard Version Bible, and it's a beautiful published one that has no chapters and no verses.
He gave it to me. It's wonderful. It's the most beautiful. I'm not saying this because he's here. It is true. The books are so special. You know, they're beautifully made. You open them up and you can read. I'm reading the book of Mark right now, and I just can flow through it and see how Mark wrote it. Not as, you know, chapter and verse and all this, and chop it up and stuff. And I have dyslexia, so it makes it even easier for me to just go through it. And it's absolutely wonderful. It's eye-opening. Anyway.
And yet, as we have our Saturday morning talks, and you are talking about what you're reading and sort of rehearsing it again in your own language, you're not just talking about what you've learned. I hear it affecting your character. I hear it affecting your decision making, your praying. And that's what the Bible is meant to do. It's meant to change us from the inside out and not just our brain. And that's what he's getting at. He taught me how to study the Bible. I study the Bible not just to become some knowledgeable person, but to teach it, not to just give people knowledge, but that it would change their lives. I mean, that's why it was written. The Word of God is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword and able to discern, to slice us up from our thoughts, our ideas, and all of that to give us a brand new view of life. And that's what the Scriptures are supposed to do. And in many ways, that's what Hendricks taught me to do in studying the Bible. And can I just give one more plug as we wrap this up a bit? So that's what a fresh take is meant to do, is to take the Scriptures not just with Bible wonk knowledge, but to maybe give it a fresh look so that it speaks to our hearts, our minds, our wills, our relationships in a new way. To make us act a little bit different. That's what Hendricks did for me. He made me love to do ministry in a new and creative way, hopefully with the ability to change people's lives.
You know, he's gone. We're going to have a lot of experts on. One of them is a dear friend of both of ours, a psychologist. And we're going to have some other ones that you know. In his years of being a well-known pastor, he's picked up a lot of good friends.
Internationally known.
Well, If you're in Africa and somebody says to you, what's the word on the street? Anyway, in the course of these programs, we're going to hope that we answer your questions, because these people are true experts. But one person I'd like to have on as a guest who's no longer with us is Charles Spurgeon someday.
Wow.
He was a brilliant man, and I just have so much respect for him, and I want to get a book on his biography, because I've heard it was a fascinating life.
Baptist pastor, London, 19th century, brilliant man who, again, was very creative, a great Bible teacher, and yet a man that impacted lives for generations. We could do the same thing in the days or months to come.
Yeah.
I could compile a number of his quotes. He wrote a book called A Series of Lectures to His Students.
Oh my.
That is really brilliant. So yes, Spurgeon would be a really good guest in the future.
In the future. For now, we're done with our first guest for our series, the great Howard Hendricks, and I hope you stay tuned for many more that we have coming your way. Thank you for listening and watching.
We'll see you.